So now we're going to move on to doing some general survey edits, drafting edits within TBC. So generally the recommended procedure is you sort any miscodings first. So if there's been things miscoded in the field, then the easiest thing is to actually address those and just update the coding. So when I look down at this bottom right hand corner of the survey, I realise that this road, this curb should continue, and the road continues down to the south here. And when I actually click on the individual points, I can see this point number 216 is curb 1 with a horizontal offset to the top of the curb. And then when I jump across to the other side of the road, it's 217. And this is still curb 1. When I go up to the next point, which is up here, then I can see that that's coded as curb 2. So basically the surveyor in the field has made a mistake, and they should have changed to curb 2 1 point earlier. So what we recommend here is you change the coding for these sort of things. Rather than, it's going to be much shorter for the code to be changed, the database to be updated, rather than manually going in, breaking a line, and drawing a new line to the curb here, especially with the line offset and everything. It's going to be much quicker to sort the codes. Now, one thing that TBC does generally is if you make a change in the database, that could have a knock-on effect on thousands, potentially millions of other points. So for instance, an example would be if you make a change in an instrument height, and maybe it's an SX10, you've scanned from that point, you've got millions of scan points. By making that one edit, you're updating millions of points. So of course you don't want to continually wait for TBC to update the whole database. So one principle within TBC is a lot of the time when you make an edit, like as we've done here, we've changed the code to KB2, it doesn't apply it immediately, but I see a red dot in the bottom right hand corner to tell me that there's an edit that's been made but hasn't yet been applied to the database. So if I want to apply an edit, I just double click that red dot or hit F4 for a shortcut, and the line work should update based on any changes that you've made. And you can see here that that one code change has changed the line, it's changed the offset line, it's changed the text to realign to where it should be, and it's been much faster to change the code than to make lots of other changes. So generally, we go through the whole project, reviewing where there's some coding mistakes. I see another one here. If I click on this individual point, 611 manhole rectangle, and then 612 manhole rectangle, the rectangle does not have a size. I can go in there and just update the size, hit F4, and once again, that's going to be much faster to do that sort of edit purely by changing the code. So the first thing that we generally do is go through and make changes to the codes. The same applies to attributes. If attributes are wrong, then we can update those. So if I click on this tree, I can see that that has got a tree spread diameter of 8 meters and a trunk diameter of 0.2. It should have a trunk diameter of 0.4. I can go in there, make that one edit, hit enter, and immediately you can see it updates accordingly. So these are the general coding changes that you can make. So once we've made these edits in the database, what we generally want to do is stop any changes with codes having a knock-on effect. So we can lock things down. So what we can do is we can just go back to our survey process feature codes, and we can say allow editing of feature codes to be changed here. And basically, if I untick that, when I make changes, it's not going to, for me, when I hit F4, it's not going to put things back in place after I've made an edit. So you can lock things down, or you can even lock the things down on an individual basis by just going into an individual line and saying, don't allow any feature code changes to have a knock-on effect to that line. So we can lock things down on lines as well. So once I've made a change to my codes, Then the next stage is doing some more CAD type edits. So this is a very common one. I want to snap that line directly. So the verge line I want to snap into the fence line. So a lot of these edits are under the CAD menu. So under CAD, you can see there's a trim extend, and I can go into trim extend, and it's as simple as saying one line to bounding line, extend. My bounding line is the fence line, and then I can just say I want to extend that line. Now, one thing we have to be a little bit careful here is if I go into the 3D view, I can see that it's actually only done it in 2D. So if I want to get that absolutely snapped in 3D, which is certainly desirable when I'm forming my DTM, then I just go back in there and I can go into edit, and we can go to the vertical tab, and I can say that one there, and the elevation can be a long line snap, and we can just quickly edit it so it actually does truly snap in to the fence line, so we don't get any silly triangles forming there. We have other options as well. Lots of these options here that you'll use for editing editing your surveys. Here, these corners in here, I'm just going to clear some of the text here, so we can just select the text and just hit delete. Don't need all the text there. And I'm going to make a break in this line. So I want a gap here. We surveyed it in the field just sort of where it was visible, but I want these to snap in together. So what I can do is I can just break the line. I'm going to break it there, and then I'll break this line here. So we've got this small bit of a line here that we can just delete out. And then I can choose this option, fillet chamfer. And there's a nice little trick to know in the chamfer one, and we can set a radius of 0, and we can just select here and select here, and you can see it creates the corner point very, very quickly. And we can see if we view that in 3D, that it's created it properly in 3D. So that's one that you use a lot, the fillet and chamfer routine. So we touched on using the join command. It's certainly one that you'll often use. So here you can see as we've moved around the building, then we've got gaps in the building that need to be joined up. So there's a surveyed point here. So what we want to do is take this line and add this point into it and then join the gap. So the way I would normally do that is select the line, right click and choose edit. And one of the options inside the edit is that we can go onto the horizontal, and there's an add after last segment, and it just allows us to basically continually add additional points onto the end of our line. And we can see here that we now have added this point into that line. From that stage, we would generally stop at editing the individual line just by escaping out, and now we want to add lines together. So I can just hold Control down to select two lines, right click, choose join line, and we just want to join these two lines together. And it tells me there's a 5 meter gap, and that's fine. And it just joins those together, and then it's highlighted in red, so we can just join the next sector. It tells me there's a 5.8 meter gap, that's fine, happy with that. And we have to be careful which side of a line we're picking, because it will join to the side that we pick to. So we're just closing it off around there. And then we see there's a little small sector here, so again we have to be careful which side we pick. And we can continually go around and adding our lines together. And we can see now the only one that's left here is there's a gap here. And the easy way to close off a gap in a building is we just select it and we choose auto close, and we just choose yes, and it will basically automatically close that off. And we now have the finished building shown correctly. Another less common edit that's maybe required is actually to physically move or to move a survey point. So if I want the spot height to move, if I go to CAD, if I go to CAD and then move and try and move it from here to here, and then apply a delta elevation, it will basically not allow me to move it. It says one object could not move. And that's principally because TBC won't allow you to basically fudge raw data. It won't allow you to lose traceability to your data. So there is a special command under survey, and it's called move survey point. And it does allow us to basically select the point, which we've got here, point 396. It allows us to move, and it allows us to put in a new elevation, and we can hit apply. And you can see here that the point actually does move, but crucially, we don't lose our traceability of the actual point. So when I turn on my my flags window here, it tells me that there's a horizontal movement of 1.9 meters. So it does tell me that that point has been moved. It's traceable. I can delete the movement and go back to the raw data. And whenever I look at anything in the database, so this 396, when I go to my point spreadsheet, it will basically flag it up as a moved point. So if I'm QCing later on, it will always show as a moved point. So that's how to move a survey point. The next step possibly in processing a survey is once we've actually got all our line work showing as we want to, then we would often want to move our text to look correctly. So we can just select our various points. Before I go on to that, maybe just touch on one thing is most of the time your symbols in your text will be set up based on a paper scale. So while not a lot of people plot these days, the beauty of setting things up to a paper scale is that we can basically change the size of our text across the whole drawing by changing one parameter. So if I go into the settings here, and if I go into the view, and if I go into the plan view, one of the settings that we have is a scale. And if I just change this to a plot scale of 200 instead of 100, then it changes all the size of my text, all the size of my symbols in one step. So we'll just undo that and go back to a 1 to 100 scale. So if we're wanting to move text, so here you can see I've got levels shown on the wrong side of a channel. I can select multiple levels, right click, and just choose swap label sides, and it will automatically flip the labels onto the correct side of the channel. If I want to move individual bits of text, then we can just select the text, and we have these two handles, so it's actually pretty easy to just grab a handle, move the text, and we can also rotate a bit of text by grabbing the rotate handle there. So it's very, very easy to move text in TBC. If we're moving complicated text like stations, it just all moves together. So we can grab a bit of a station text and move it onto the correct side of the channel there. And then if we want to add annotative text, then we can just go to drafting. We can say text. Again, we would generally choose one of our text styles that are set up in TBC as part of our template. So we can say it's 3mm bold text. And then that will automatically make it based on, if I use one of these text styles, it will make it based on the paper scaling of 3mm. And then we can start putting in our text. And then it actually highlights it before we drop it. So we can just drop it, and then it just remains there for us to drop it in multiple instances of the same text. So it's very quick to just go through and annotate your areas. And because these are bits of text, as any other bit of text, then we can go in and we can scale and rotate. I've got that set to auto flip, and we can move the text as we need to. So that covers the basic editing within TBC. Obviously, we're just scratching the surface of what can be done, but these are the main things that you'll be using when doing sort of CAD edits inside Trimble Business Centre. So the next stage generally would be to form your digital terrain model. and we'll cover that in the next video.